Hello my friends, welcome back to Garhdo Goes Geek. On today's episode, I'm going to be taking a look at another little review for a science fiction film, an original science fiction film, which released last year to quite a popular and positive reception. And it's a film I was interested in from the minute I saw the first trailers. But unfortunately, I've only recently got around to seeing. It's now available on Disney Plus, so I thought this would be a great time to discuss it and try and encourage people to go and watch it, because I think it's really good and I think it's going to be a bit of a sleeper hit. So let's talk about The Creator. Now, The Creator is a science fiction action film produced, directed, and co-written by Gareth Edwards. Now, Gareth Edwards has a small but very, very notable filmography. He's done a few television episodes here and there and a TV movie and things like that. But his main film work that he's known for is that he was the director of both the 2014 Godzilla film and the 2016 Star Wars Rogue One, as well as the writer and director of his own independent film Monsters, where he was also director of photography, visual effects, and production designer. That was basically his baby. He did it himself. Now, I've not seen Monsters. I've heard nothing but good things about it, but it's not one that I've actually managed to get around to seeing as of yet. But obviously, so my first exposure to Gareth Edwards' work was Godzilla. I genuinely quite like the 2014 Godzilla. I'm going to be doing an episode on Godzilla later on this year, where I'm hoping to look at all of the MonsterVerse. So I'll be giving my thoughts in a bit more detail there. But yeah, essentially I like it. It's pretty good for what it is. The scope is pretty good. I think the way he shot it is impressive. Like, you can see the scale of these creatures, and scale is also an element that's at the core of Rogue One. Shots like the Star Destroyer above the city, shots of the Death Star being built, really, even the final space battle really demonstrates the scale of what's going on. And scale is that sort of devotion to scale, and the techniques that Gareth Edwards seems to use in his films, seems to like to use, are all over The Creator. Like, his visual style is there. He's got a very particular visual style that is all over this film. And even if all you've seen is those two big tentpole marquee films that he's done, you can recognize it. Now, like I said, this is an original idea. This seems to have been him taking the money and the fame and the attention that Rogue One and Godzilla have brought to him, and taking them and going to create something of his own. Now, I really like this film. I first saw a trailer for it sort of midway through last year, because it was released back in September, sort of end of September. And I remember seeing trailers for it about midway through the year, and I didn't know what to think of it at first. It was this, the trailers featured these very broadly, very visual images of what was going on, like shots of the advanced tanks and vehicles, but also contrasted with, like, the kind of shantytown look that's going on in certain aspects, and the robot characters, the simulant characters, where you can see the technology, but it's kind of flawlessly put in through the visual effects over the actual acting performance. For example, Ken Watanabe's character is a simulant, and so he's got the simulant head design behind his main face. And I'll get into a bit more about the visual effects in a bit. But yeah, it was a very, very visual trailer, and there were some good lines in it from the main characters, specifically the discussion about heaven, which if you've seen the trailers or seen the film, you'll know what part I'm referring to. The discussion between the girl Alfie and Joshua Taylor, played by John David Washington. Yeah, very, very good. That little line, very poignant. And I just remember thinking this looked incredible, and I didn't quite know what to make of it. Like, there was a lot of big explosions. It looked like a big war film, and it looks quite bombastic. But then I was looking it up, and I'm like, apparently it's being made for a budget of only $80 million. So it's not, in terms of blockbuster budgets, it's not huge. Like, this is not a very, it can't be an effects driven blockbuster in the same way as something like a Marvel film. But then at the same time, I was looking at the trailer and thinking, well, no, it is, because look at this effects work. This effects work's really good. And yes, it's not the sort of popcorn movie. It feels a bit more gritty and grounded than that. But this feels on a par with something like Star Wars, for example. It's a very lived-in world. So it was a film that had my attention, and I did have every intention to see it in the cinema. But there was a lot of upheaval towards the end of last year in my own personal life that just meant I couldn't actually get out to the cinema to see it. There was also the intent there to review it a bit earlier than this, and to possibly rent it and do it that way. As it is, I've seen it on Disney Plus, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to buy the Blu-ray to this. I want to see the making of. I want to see all the special features, because this has really impressed me. So let's discuss the actual film itself a little bit. The film is set in 2025, so it is a science fiction. However, it does also feel a bit like the opening montage movie feels a bit like alternate history as well, because obviously there are, we're starting to approach AI. People use AI tools, AI algorithms. A lot of it isn't technically artificial intelligence yet, in the sort of science fiction sense of what an artificial intelligence is. They aren't thinking things. They are essentially very, very clever algorithms and pattern recognition programs. Something like ChatGPT isn't an AI yet. It's obviously the foundation for training that sort of thing, but it's not there yet. Same with these AI image filters. They're called AI, but they're not. They're sort of an algorithmic intelligence rather than an artificial intelligence. But this sort of presents a world, and I say alternate history because some of the footage has that kind of grainy film quality of like old video, despite showing some of the more advanced things from this world. So that's why I'm leaning towards an element of alternate history there as well. Part of that might also be the way the film is shot. Like, the film has been shot on, I think it has been shot on film, and it's been shot in an ultra-wide aspect ratio to make it feel like the sort of classic Hollywood epics. So it's the 2.76 to 1 aspect ratio. So the images are very big, just very narrow widescreen. It looks incredible. The film itself, like I said, the plot is a world where AI exists. Robots have been built for a while. There's also been the movement into creating simulants. Simulants have human faces, essentially, but have a head type that reveals them very much as robots, as artificial people. That seems to be part of the pattern. Like they will always they have a distinct look to them. So there's simulants, robots, and humans all having very distinct profiles and silhouettes and things like that, despite the similarities between them. And at some point in the past of this future world, according to documents I can find online, it's apparently in 2055, but I don't recall that being said in the film. But essentially, a nuclear warhead is detonated in LA. Kills 100 million people instantly. Obviously, a devastating attack. And it is blamed on an artificial intelligence. And so America goes to war against AI. Now, I think it's kind of implied that other Western nations are involved in this struggle as well, but it's very definitely an American-led thing. And that is one of the things that resonated with me. As someone who's grown up under a lot of 21st century American foreign policy, and seeing the actions that they have taken in countries around the world and this very aggressive military practices that they've engaged in, that was something that really kind of struck out at me as like, wow, I get what they're trying to do here. And, what can I say? It worked for me. But I'll cover that more in a bit. And so AI and robots and simulants are all kind of outlawed in the West, but like I said, especially America. Meanwhile, there is the so-called New Asia. Now, it's not really defined what that is. There's language elements of, Japan, China, India, Thailand, Vietnam. But I don't think it's ever really kind of explained what countries are a part of this New Asia. Again, looking online, I can find Southeast Asia, Japan, Taiwan, Bangladesh, Nepal, India. But in terms of the words that are used, there's a lot of root words from a lot of Asian countries there. And they do use language from them, like the typography of those different languages throughout the end credits and a lot of the signage in the film as well. But yeah, it's New Asia. It has its own kind of combined language that's used quite a lot according to the subtitles for the film. It's speaking New Asian. It's not listed as Taiwanese or Thai or Japanese. It's listed as New Asian in the credits. Now, New Asia continues to embrace AI and what AI can offer. And they want to kind of support these artificial people. So the robots, the simulants, they're trying to look after them. And there is a character that is sort of revered by a lot of the artificial life forms called Namata, which is actually an origin of a Nepalese word. It's actually defined at the opening of the film, the opening card. Namata is basically creator. It's this figure that the artificial intelligence believes is responsible for their creation. And so is they look at it as kind of the architect behind all of the advancements in AI. The American military sees Namata as an actual figure, like a figurehead being used by the robots, by the new Asian state, and so that's like their priority target. And what essentially follows is a war film as they hunt this target. And we see also the deployment of the USS Nomad, which in this is a space station that is sort of hovering over New Asia. And it moves across and projects this light beam onto the ground, sort of scanning for targets all the time. It's a very ominous threat. And I'll cover that more in a minute. I've got things to say about some of the theming of this movie, and Nomad is something that I think works very much at the core theme of this film. And the plot basically involves the main character is Joshua Taylor, who was an undercover operative in New Asia, where he fell in love with a woman called Maya Fey, who we later learn is believed to be the daughter of Namata, but he actually fell in love with her. She ended up pregnant, and in the opening of the movie, a US raid kind of sees her killed along with a lot of the other people that he'd kind of sort of assimilated into while undercover, and sees him having to come back to America after they're killed by Nomad. And then we catch up in 2065, and he's one of the Ground Zero cleanup crew in Los Angeles when he gets approached by a pair of military officers played by Ralph Ineson and Alison Janney as General Andrews and Colonel Howell, respectively. And they're on a mission to destroy a new weapon engineered by Namata, something called Alpha O, which is believed to be capable of destroying Nomad. If that happens, that will shift the balance of the whole war in favor of the AI. So to recruit him, they play a video showing that Maya is alive, and they suggest that he can find and reunite with her if he joins the team. So he does, joins the team. The strike team goes into New Asia, deploys from I don't think they even deploy from Nomad, thinking about it. They deploy into New Asia. Nomad's behind them, like offering support. They break into this compound base believed to hold the weapon, and all they find is a simulant, a single simulant in the form of a young girl. But it's revealed that this girl has the ability to remotely control technology. And Taylor ends up sort of separated from his team. A lot of his team are killed. The compound is destroyed by Nomad, and he ends up with the girl, who he realizes is Alpha O, so he dubs her Alfie. He disobeys Howell's orders to kill her, and the two of them travel to try and find his former commanding officer, who is now undercover. Well, not even undercover. He's now essentially living in New Asia. And Drew examines Alfie, reveals that she's probably the most powerful weapon on the planet. Her abilities are going to continue to grow. And then, they find themselves on the run from New Asian police. They've got Colonel Howell and her chief commanding officer. What's his name? McBride. So he's like the last remaining member of the team. They're both hunting him as well, which means they're monitoring police bands. They've got like a translator device that they're monitoring the police bands with. They're in a stolen police vehicle as well, so they're trying to at one point there's a firefight. They disguise themselves as police officers, but they're too late. Taylor and Drew and Alfie have managed to escape, and it all goes basically it's a chase movie from that point for a little bit. We end up meeting sort of the new Asian resistance, which includes Harun, the simulant played by Ken Watanabe, who Taylor knew back when he was undercover. And it all kind of leads them to try and find out who Namata is, to try and find Maya. And there's a lot going on. Now, I don't want to spoil the end for anyone who hasn't seen it, but if anything that I've kind of said has maybe got you interested, I recommend going to watch it. It's good. Now, the plotting is pretty good. I was engaged the whole way through. The characters are not the best written characters I've ever come across. They are kind of archetypical. Like you're meant to sort of understand them at a glance, kind of. And some of them, like Harun, are given quite light development, like just enough to service the plot. And that is one of the things that I have seen criticized about this movie. Like when it came to its its reception, its critical response, one of the things that seems to be criticized quite a lot is that it's, while it's visually stunning and looks very unique, a lot of the sort of the familiar tropes and familiar character designs are all kind of still here as well. And like I said, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I've also seen comparisons to things like Children of Men, and it's like I don't think it's as bleak as Children of Men, but there's definitely some darker themes at play compared to a lot of other sci-fi shows, but sci-fi ideas. But this is, it's a sci-fi dystopia, and it's a really interesting one. And like I said, I'm going to get into it in a bit more in a minute, but just know going in, if you're expecting finely written characters, what there is serviceable, and I think you will care about the characters and about the plot as you go on. I certainly did. I was invested enough in the characters and the story being told that I'm like, it's not losing my attention, but they're not the richest characters I have ever come across. Definitely not bad, but not the richest. And I think the development that they have works. Like John David Washington is doing really well as, he's a charismatic enough lead as Joshua Taylor. His bond with the the young actress Madeline Yuna-Voiles, who is playing Alfie, it works perfectly well for what it needs to for the film. Same with his bond with Ken Watanabe as Harun. The flashbacks we get towards him and Gemma Chan playing Maya, to their romance and how it kind of establishes that fits and works. It feels believable. What's there is kind of shown, not directly told to us. The flashbacks do work at kind of showing the bond between the characters. But yeah, it's a decent cast acting, kind of stock characters, but acting them well. And things can work with stock characters. Like the Star Wars is built on stock characters. In fact, Star Wars inspired several stock characters. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have characters fit a particular role or a particular niche in a project. It works fine for what it is. Some people might criticize it or complain about it, but for me, it works. It does everything it needs to. So I'm gonna. That's all I'm gonna say about that. I think if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. I think you'll enjoy it. But I'm going to get into a bit more of the theming of this film and why it really resonated with me. And there may be some things that in there that people might consider spoilers. So this is your warning. If this is where you're leaving us, I hope you'll come back and listen to the rest and look after yourself in the meantime until the next one. But otherwise, let's discuss the theming a bit more. One quick thing before I get into the themes that really resonated with me. One thing that I really, really liked about this was the visual effects. There is a lot of bang for the buck in terms of, that $80 million budget has been finally wrung out. Now, principal photography has pretty much entirely taken place in Thailand. And Thailand has some absolutely beautiful backdrops. It's been used as the inspiration and filming location for a lot of sci-fi, sort of alien planets. I've seen, it's been used as an inspiration for a lot of video games, especially, is where I've seen it. But yeah, I know from seeing pictures of Thailand that it has some incredible natural landscapes that work really well for a film like this. And a lot of that is also used here. You've got all the standard things you would expect from a Southeast Asian filming location. Some of which plays into the the theming that I'm going to get to in a minute. But there's parts of this that are shot in big cities, but there's also parts of it that are shot in shanty towns. There's parts of it that are shot in rice fields. There's part of it that are shot in the mountains. There's parts that are shot in basically a Shaolin, a monastery. A monastery in the mountains. There's bits shot down by the coast. There's bits shots further inland. And it all really works for me. I think it looks stunning. Now, one of the things I did read about the visual effects for this, and these visual effects are now nominated for an Oscar, as well as several awards at the visual effects awards. The Visual Effects Society has nominated the creator in about 7 different categories. And I think it kind of deserves most of them, to be honest. So yeah, I'll come to that in a minute. But yeah, one of the things I read was that they didn't plan the shots with a view of what to add or what characters would be replaced with robots or simulants, which means that there's very little green screen or motion capture suits or things like that involved. Instead, the animation has been done over the existing character shots, which means they've essentially filmed everything using real people and then edited the imagery to add things or detract things. So in the case of simulants, they've lost hair and they've lost they've had the simulant part of the head put in. In the case of the robots, they've had their bodies, their faces replaced with the robot apparatus, because a lot of the robots have a very distinctive look in this. There's a few different designs that kind of reappear. But yeah, it just means it's all been shot with people. And that really works for me, because it means that, apparently Gareth Edwards was saying he was basically going through in the editing process and looking at the shots that they'd taken and kind of saying, right, turn that person into a simulant, turn that person into a robot, and just pointing arbitrarily at different people. And the thing about it that I think really works is it's not always characters in the foreground. It's not always the main characters. Sometimes it is just people in the background of a shot who are transformed. And it gives that real sort of scope to it, because it could be anyone. And that means that in these big crowd shots, you know, there's moments where you'll see so many people who have been digitally replaced one way or the other. And, you know, even if you don't directly see them, the fact that it could be anyone and you get used to seeing them in crowd scenes suggests that there could be so many that you just don't notice. And that really works because it means these AI characters have just blended in. And that's how New Asia is kind of portraying itself. They have just blended in. They are people there with the same, seemingly the same rights and protections as anyone else. You know, they are generally being considered as people, unlike how a lot of the American people view the artificials. There's also, and they did the same thing with the scenery as well. Like, they've shot things and then just added stuff in, you know, enhance the landscape shots they've taken with, you know, these digital creations, enhance the, you know, there's a floating village where the resistance seems to be based, and, you know, it's got a lot of shantytown elements to it. It's around a lake. I shouldn't say shantytown. I don't know if that's a negative. But, you know, things just kind of look kind of ramshackle and kind of, you know, less of a solid foundation. Things have been just erected and constructed all around each other. And it's a hell of a look, and it looks amazing. Gives for a real kind of community shot, you know, seeing the people just living there and existing. And I think that works for the resistance because they are just existing and depending on each other. And then these gigantic tanks come in and flatten it. Yeah, it's amazing. Looks really, really good. And yeah, the big principal visual effect is obviously Nomad itself. Nomad has this really good design. Like, it's got a unique visual design. It's got its own sound effects. Gareth Edwards revealed that it basically took him the entirety of the COVID-19 lockdowns to design it. He was sort of, he envisioned it as kind of like this all-seeing eye in the sky that's kind of looking at everyone. So he said they kept playing with shapes of like a bird of prey and an eye in the sky. So you end up with a structure that has this central ring, but then these large, long wings coming out of it. And I think it looks incredible. You know, he got the people who worked with him on Godzilla to help him design the sound effects. He also, semi-related to this, but it's one of the post-production tidbits which I found really interesting, and I don't know where else to include it, is that the assembly cut of this movie, which is where they basically take everything they've shot for the film, so multiple takes, everything, and all kind of assemble it into a rough order of the film. The assembly cut of this ran for about 5 hours and did not use any temp tracks for the music. So it literally just used the sound design. And Gareth Edwards decided that they wouldn't add any music to the film throughout the entire editing process so that they could get the pacing and the story structure right before they added the music. He said it was a super interesting experience. He said, part of me thinks that I would do that again because it puts a lot of pressure on the sound design, but then you're not hiding behind music to save the storytelling. And like I said, the storytelling here is not the best I've ever seen. The character writing's not the best I've ever seen, but it's a solid story and it really works. So I'm fine with it. But now, the theming of this. Now, obviously, a lot of people have drawn quite obvious links to discussions around AI and, the similar approach to what we've had of, AI warfare in films. This is not, it's not an unexplored area to have humans versus AI in a sci-fi film. Something that's gone back to Terminator, Blade Runner. It's a long existing idea. The thing is here, what differs here is the way the AI is portrayed. There are several scenes in this film that show that the artificials, whether it's the robots or the simulants, really, really care about the people around them, really care about the humans. There's one moment which is particularly harrowing quite early on, where while he's working on the LA cleanup, they find a car with a corpse in of a mother and child and a robot, and they pull the robot out of the car, and I think Taylor's doing something with it, and it reactivates and it starts screaming for the child, that because it's there to protect the child. And this is harkening back to things in like Asimov, the whole laws of robotics and protecting humans and things like that. But this robot seems really anguished at the idea of what's happened to this girl Amy, that he's shouting out for her, pleading, like, where is she? Please tell me she's safe. And it's harrowing, and it has a real visible, really palpable effect on Harrison, the woman who's working with Taylor for this. But Taylor's attitude towards the robots at this point in the movie is very derisory, because obviously this is quite early on, and he's like, they're just robots, they don't have feelings, they don't care, it's all just programming. But it's like, it doesn't feel like programming. And then later on, when you actually meet more of the robot characters and we spend more time among them, and the simulants as well, they really do feel real. There's a robot character, I don't think he's ever named, but there is a robot who works with Harron, and he, as part of the resistance, and he's quite prominent. He has some amazing lines and feels really kind of like he's angry when he sees Taylor again, seeing him as a betrayer, because of what happened in the past. So he's really angry at Taylor. But then during the attack by the tanks on the floating village, he gets targeted and he tries to run and flee and almost runs into a group of like cowering humans, including children, and he runs away from them so that they don't get caught in the blast that kills him. And that's, again, it's moving stuff. And, even the way the characters talk about the simulants, the robots, like, Drew has gone from being very anti-robot to living in New Asia, to living with the artificials, to the point that he even has an artificial girlfriend. His simulant, he has a simulant for a girlfriend called Cammy. And she, she ends up killed, and he mourns her death, and it has a real effect on him. It's palpable, you can see it. And, it becomes very, very clear that they're not just programming, they are people on their own. You know, these are some of the most advanced and believably human AI that I think I've ever seen in a science fiction film. And it really kind of drew me in. You know, they really do feel human. They have pain and struggle and all sorts of emotions going on. And yeah, seeing some of the scenes between them and, you know, discussions between them, and not just Alfie as well. Like, I've barely spoken about Alfie, but she's so lovely, like so endearing. And, you know, seeing how vulnerable she is, and then seeing scenes like her playing with other children and how happy that makes her. You know, it's so good. It's absolutely incredible to watch. So that was one theme that really stuck with me. And because it, you know, it'd be easy to write this off as an AI war film, but that's not what it feels like. What it feels like is a civil rights film. You know, the idea of these artificials having rights and being treated and viewed as people. Like, Alfie actually says at a couple of points in the movie she wants robots to be free. You know, that's her stated goal. She wants her people to be free. That's an emancipation film. You know, you could, you know, replace them with blacks in 60s America, replace them with gay and trans people now. That's, you know, it's the discussion that's been happening throughout human history almost, you know, of a group of people who want to be free. You know, it's, oh yeah, that really worked for me, really resonated with me. You know, like I've said before, I am a queer person, so that kind of, you know, I'm bisexual and I'm agender. You know, I don't see myself as, you know, succumbing to the gender binary, and I love who I love, you know, male or female or whatever, you know. So identifying as a queer person and seeing, you know, the struggles that these artificials are having to be seen as people, and people just deriding them for who they are, you know, saying, oh, you know, and it's a different type of prejudice, but it's, you know, prejudice is prejudice, and you can see it and you can recognize it, especially when, if you're a person that is part of a group that is being prejudiced against, you know, I don't know how the right way to phrase that is. There is a group that is experiencing prejudice in the modern day or in recent history. You can see it in these robots, and that really resonated with me. So there was that aspect. But then the final bit of theming, the bit that really got me, like I said, I'm a millennial. I'm an elder millennial. I grew up in the, you know, I was a teenager when the millennium happened and when 9/11 happened. And then off the back of 9/11, I grew up into adulthood with, you know, the war on terror and the American foreign policy that resulted from it. And seeing the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and seeing the struggles that came about as a result of it. And, you know, those wars went on for a long time. And for the most part, so much of it was the really advanced industrial military complex of North America, of the United States, going up against, you know, terrorist insurgents with Kalashnikovs. And that's basically what happens here. You know, it's a highly advanced military force, military special ops in body armor and advanced weaponry and night vision goggles and infrared and all of that, going up against people, just ordinary people, protecting their families, protecting their livelihoods. And that's exactly what you see in this film. The shots in Thailand, anytime we see any sort of battle going on here, the feeling that I got from this movie was that we are meant to see the Americans as the villains. And I don't know whether that's the intention of the filmmakers, but that is how I saw it. Because the things we see the Americans do, the things we see Nomad do, even before, we get towards the end of the film, and, spoilers, last chance, the final part of the movie sees Joshua and Alfie go to Nomad to take control of it so that they could stop Nomad destroying every robot base in New Asia, because Nomad is about to fire like all of its missiles, and Ralph Ineson as General Andrews is in Nomad mission control trying to stop them. But it's like, even before that point, even before it is highly obvious that America is the villain and that Joshua is going to have to stand against them with Alfie, watching how the American forces act, even from the opening in the prologue where we see Nomad destroy, seemingly destroy and kill Maya and Harun and all the rest of them through a missile strike. I was wincing seeing the attacks from Nomad. Like, every time Nomad launched a missile and it struck its target, I was wincing, because it's such an overwhelming show of force compared to what they're fighting. The tank battle in the floating village is another fine example. These gigantic tanks, and I mean gigantic, they are land crawlers that are about 3 or 4 stories tall with thick armor plating and these powerful missile weapons that lock onto targets and then fire rockets that just annihilate people. And they take out boats full of civilians. They take out the soldiers fighting against them. And like I said, these soldiers have AK-47s. They've got Kalashnikovs. They don't have advanced weaponry. They have some bombs that they use, but for the most part, their weaponry is basic, and they can't make a dent against these tanks. And we see people fleeing for their lives, people running out of the shantytown structures before they get flattened by these tanks. It's a difficult watch seeing that. Like I said, this does not feel in any way like we are meant to sympathize with America. The American forces in this are the villains. They're being led by Alison Janney's Colonel Howell. They are the villains. Her actions are villainous. We see her execute people in cold blood. We see her, like, at one point, and this just shows the hypocrisy of the American military industrial complex, which is around in the modern day as well. So, but they use robots. There's a point in the village battle where they use robots packed with explosives and order them to run out and, blow themselves up. And it's horrible, to see it. That, their outlawing of artificials doesn't seem to extend to any in the military. And these are robots that they've created to destroy themselves. Like, that's literally their sole purpose. They're bombs. They're walking humanoid bombs. That's all they exist for. And yes, seeing the actions of the American military in this, like I said, you cannot see them as heroes. You know, even if we weren't already enamored with the characters of Joshua and Alfie and their struggle, and specifically their efforts to evade the Americans are not the heroes in this. Like, there's a reason why Gareth Edwards has announced as one of his inspirations for this film, you know, not just things like Akira and Blade Runner, and as you'd expect, but also things like Apocalypse Now. You know, a film that shows kind of the horrors of war done in an epic, because that's how the warfare in this is portrayed. It's awful. You know, not to use the cliche of war is hell, but like, the theming here is that America is not the heroes because of their callous disregard for life, not just human life, artificial life as well, but they're just disregard for life. They make no effort to protect anyone. They're enacting a military war against rebels within a foreign nation state. Like, we don't see them attacking the cities of New Asia. We see them attacking people on the outskirts. This rebellion trying to keep robots safe. If it was a legitimate war, they'd be opposing the cities where there are actually people. But no, they're not. They're using Nomad to launch missile strikes on villages and shanty towns and monasteries. And, you know, launching spec ops soldiers into scientific compounds to kill unarmed scientists. You know, that to me is the theming of this movie, that this film is very much pro-civil rights and anti-war. And that's what I got from it. That's what resonated with me about this movie, regardless of anything else. And I think that's the key to good science fiction. Science fiction should always try and tap in to something relevant to the modern day and use it as an allegory. You know, people try and say, oh, when did sci-fi get political? You know, idiots who have no media literacy will turn around and say, well, when did Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever get political? They've always been political. All science fiction is political. Most speculative fiction in general is political. It is, you know, when an author creates something, there's the things they are explicitly saying, the things they're not aware they're saying, and the things that they're not saying. And for me, the things in this movie that the creators, especially Gareth Edwards, are definitely trying to say is that war, especially the modern type of warfare where it is a military powered state that vastly outguns the opponents that it's fighting, and is fighting in disproportionate measures that are essentially bullying tactics to seek the oppression of a group of people, is bad. And I think it's even more important now that we see that not just in America, but, you know, in the current political climate, you know, the war in Ukraine, the war in, you know, the the actions of Israel in Gaza, and now the recent bombing strikes from America and Britain against the Houthis rebels in Yemen. It's exactly the same thing. It's the exact same type of warfare all the time, and it's disgusting. And this film is a very firm critique against it. And that, to me, is another reason why it really resonated with me right now. So, yeah, thanks for joining me for that one. Sorry if I got a bit deep there at the end. But, yeah, I'm a bit... Like I said, I'm a bit of a leftist. So, yeah, I only like war in fiction. I don't like real war. Don't think it should exist. Don't think there's any need for it to exist. But yeah, that's my opinions on The Creator. I thought this was a really good film. I really enjoyed this. And it's at the point where I want to learn more about it. Like I said, I want to buy the Blu-ray. I want to watch the making of. I want to see everything about it. Like, if there's deleted scenes or anything like that, I want those too. You know, I really want to just go all in and learn everything there is to know about this movie, because it's captivating and I had a thoroughly good time with it. Like, I enjoyed the film, I enjoyed the conclusion to the film, I enjoyed the story it told along the way. You know, it was emotional when it needed to be. It was tense when it needed to be. You know, it's perfectly serviceable. Is it anything spectacular? No. You know, it's not one of the best films I've ever seen. But considering it only did 104 million at the box office, possibly because it also released during the strikes, obviously, I think it deserved better than that. You know, and I kind of hope this film goes on to get more success. Now, I don't think it's in a position where they can do a sequel, but, you know, I don't think it's a story that works for that. But I'd love to see more ideas from Gareth Edwards in this vein. I think he's a very talented filmmaker, and I think this film shows that. He's a decent writer and a good filmmaker, like a very good filmmaker. And, you know, what more do you want? I think we need more original ideas. You know, people are constantly criticizing about how many reboots and remakes there are all the time. And here's this original science fiction idea. And it's good and it really works. And it was just hurt because of the time it released it. You know? And like I said, this is visually stunning. Like the guy who worked on Dune, the cinematographer from Dune, worked on this. And like, which one is it? Greg Fraser and Oren Sofer, who worked on the cinematography on this. And it's like, yeah. And Oren Sofer came in to take over as director of photography for the main production shoot by Greg Fraser, because Fraser had worked on the pre-production, but then had to move to a remote role because he was also due to film Dune Part 2. You see, because the original goal was that he'd be done with Dune, but then obviously Dune got pushed back due to lockdowns and other things like that. So, yeah, you know. So yeah, you've got this film that looks incredible and is perfectly serviceable for what it is, that just seems to have flown under everyone's radar, and I don't think it deserves that. I think it deserves a bit more than that. So yeah, go watch it. Let me know what you think about it. I'd love to hear it, as always. In the meantime, you all look after yourselves, take the very best care of yourselves. The first episode of the returning season 5 is coming up tomorrow, in fact, by the time I post this. And yeah, because I get the feeling like I've become a bit of a review podcast recently. I have more to discuss. I've got some very, very good episodes coming. I'm very excited for them. And yeah, I'm hoping to get into more of a regular release schedule around here. So if all goes well, there should be 3 episodes for you to enjoy this weekend. So until next time, my friends, you take care of yourselves, look after your physical and mental health the very best you can, and until next time, bye for now.
Thank you, my friends, for once again joining me on Garhdo Goes Geek. Your continued support for this podcast means the absolute world to me, and I am grateful for every single one of you who stays and listens to one of my episodes. It means the absolute world. Now, if you would like to engage more with me or the podcast, we have a Discord community, small but growing, and we now have commissions open on Ko-Fi. So if there's a topic you would like to see me cover, you can pay me to cover it. All funds will be used for legal purchase of the relevant items where I do not have them. Have a look on the link tree for more information. Until next time, look after yourselves.